The architect who wasn't allowed to dream. 9 years of blueprints, late-night renderings, client presentations that always went one revision too far. I had climbed the ladder. Junior designer, associate, project lead. I thought I was building something real, a future, a reputation, maybe even a legacy. But somewhere between the corporate meetings and the endless modern farmhouse requests, I started to feel invisible. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. We were in a design review for a new sustainable housing project, my project, something I'd spent 6 months developing. It was supposed to be a flagship for Hearthstone, low-income housing that actually looked beautiful, designed to be energy independent using modular solar glass panels and reclaimed materials, a model for affordable architecture done right. I had run the numbers. I had sourced local suppliers. I had even built a scale prototype with a small team of interns. When I finished my presentation, I felt proud, nervous, but proud. And then, Gregory Lane, the managing director, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "It's cute, Elena," he said, "but we're not in the charity business. Clients pay for luxury, not lectures." The room went quiet. A few polite chuckles followed. Someone murmured something about idealism and market realities. I stood there with my sketches in hand, feeling heat crawl up my neck. I tried to explain that the costs were sustainable, that the market was shifting, that people actually wanted homes that reflected responsibility. But Gregory waved it off. "You're good at finishes," he said. "Stick to that. Leave the big ideas to people who understand business." That line hit harder than he probably realized. I had spent years studying not just architecture but systems, energy flow, urban planning, adaptive reuse. I believed buildings could tell stories, that design could make life a little fairer, a little more human. But in that moment, standing in that polished conference room surrounded by people who cared more about marble countertops than meaning, I knew something had snapped. When the meeting ended, I collected my models quietly. Nobody looked up. Nobody said a word. I went back to my office, small but mine, and shut the door. I sat there staring at the half-finished rendering on my screen. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat I could no longer feel. After a while, I opened my old files. Projects I had started but never pitched. Sketches of modular designs that could be built with recycled materials. Self-cooling facades. Vertical gardens. Systems that learned from weather data. I had ideas that Hearthstone would never touch. And then, almost without thinking, I opened a blank folder and titled it Project Lumen. That night, I stayed in the office until midnight. I built the first draft of a concept for self-adaptive microhousing. Small units that could shift their internal layout based on temperature, sunlight, and occupancy. It was architecture powered by AI and empathy. It was everything I believed in. By the time I left the office, downtown Austin was quiet, the skyline reflecting off the river like something asleep. I walked to my car and sat there for a long time, just breathing. I felt like I was on the edge of something. Not success, exactly, but truth. I drove home to my apartment, where my boyfriend Ryan was still awake, typing on his laptop. He worked in finance. Numbers. Forecasts. The safe route. He looked up and said, "You're late again. Let me guess, Gregory had you redoing someone's kitchen island?" I smiled weakly and said, "Something like that." We didn't talk much after that. Ryan wasn't cruel, just uninterested in the world I lived in. He liked certainty. I liked possibilities. Before I went to bed, I emailed myself the Project Lumen file, just a habit. Backups make me feel safe. The next morning, I checked my savings. $41,200. Not nearly enough to start a design firm. but enough to live frugally for a few months if I was brave or reckless enough. I kept working at Hearthstone for another week. I showed up, smiled when needed, nodded in meetings I wasn't really present for. But every night, I went home and worked on Lumen. I started testing small simulation models using open-source AI tools. The system could adjust room configurations based on light exposure, airflow, and energy usage. It learned patterns. It improved. I wasn't just designing buildings anymore. I was designing how buildings behave. And then something happened. A local community organization posted an open call for architects willing to submit designs for a sustainable micro-housing prototype. The exact concept Lumen was built around. They were offering $10,000 in grant funding to develop a proof of concept. I almost laughed when I read it. It felt like the universe had just nodded in my direction. That night, I filled out the application. I didn't mention Hearthstone. I submitted everything under my own name, Elena Torres, independent architect. I didn't tell anyone. 2 weeks later, an email arrived in my inbox with the subject line, "Congratulations, you've been selected." I remember just staring at it, heart racing, hands shaking a little. I was in. The next morning, I walked into Gregory's office and handed him my resignation letter. He looked at me for a long moment, like he couldn't decide whether to be surprised or annoyed. "You're serious?" he asked. "Completely," I said. He sighed. "Well, good luck out there. You'll be back once you realize how hard the real world is." I smiled, a calm, steady smile, and said, "You have no idea how real it's about to get." I walked out of that building with no backup plan, no team, and no safety net. But for the first time in years, I felt completely alive. The first morning after I quit, I woke up terrified. You know that moment when you wake before the alarm, and for a few seconds, you forget what day it is? That was me, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling that brief calm before the memory hits. And then it did. Oh, right. I don't have a job. For a minute, I just lay there, watching the light crawl across the wall. I should have felt regret. I didn't. I just felt exposed. Like I'd stepped out of a house that was quietly suffocating me and didn't realize how stale the air had been until I could finally breathe. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started planning. No more committee approvals, no more gatekeepers, just me, my sketches, and the idea that wouldn't leave me alone, Project Lumen. I rented a tiny co-working desk at a local makerspace. It was loud, full of 3D printers and people building weird inventions that probably wouldn't make money, but would make them happy. It felt right. My first prototype was nothing glamorous. I built it out of cardboard and plexiglass, using sensors from a cheap home automation kit. I called it Unit A. It could shift its window shades based on sunlight and adjust airflow through tiny vents that responded to temperature. Primitive, sure. But when the system responded, when the tiny shade tilted on its own for the first time, I actually teared up. I think that's what real creation feels like. Not pride, just awe. But freedom comes with bills. By month 2, my savings had shrunk fast. I lived off instant noodles, canceled my gym membership, and stopped eating out. I told Ryan I needed space, which was partly true. But what I really needed was silence. He didn't understand. He called it a midlife crisis. I called it survival. Then came the call from Cara Lou. She was an old classmate from grad school, brilliant, blunt, and always a little ahead of everyone else. We hadn't spoken in years. She said, "I saw your name on the micro-housing shortlist. Lumen, right? That's yours? Yeah, I said carefully. How'd you know? I'm on the judging panel, she said, laughing. Small world. You always did like impossible ideas. We met for coffee the next day. She had started her own architecture firm 2 years earlier, Atelier Novo. Small, but respected, known for green design and smart systems. The kind of work Hearthstone would never touch. She listened as I explained Lumen's core idea, the adaptive systems, the modular spaces, the potential for scalability. When I finished, she just sat there, tapping her cup. Finally, she said, "You're onto something, but it's too big to build alone. You need a partner, someone who can handle the structural integration, while you focus on system behavior." She paused. "Let's collaborate." I didn't know whether to feel grateful or suspicious. Collaboration meant shared credit, shared risk, but also, maybe, survival. We shook hands. Atelier Novo plus Elena Torres. We started working from her studio downtown. A bright, messy space filled with scale models and plants that somehow thrived on neglect. Days blurred into nights. We worked on simulations, rewired prototypes, crashed code, argued, laughed. It was chaos, but it was purposeful chaos. Then the setback hit. During a live demo for the community board, the same group funding our project, one of the AI modules glitched. The structure started folding its interior panels unpredictably, like it was panicking. People gasped. Someone actually laughed. It was humiliating. Gregory, my old boss, was in the audience. Don't ask me why. Probably to watch me fail. And he did that thing people do when they pretend to look concerned, but their eyes are smiling. After the demo, the project lead told me they'd reconsider our funding until we addressed the stability issues. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the studio, sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at the failed prototype. Kara stopped by around midnight. She didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me and passed a bottle of water. After a while, she said softly, "You know what your problem is, Torres. You want perfection before permission. You don't let people see the mess, and that's why they don't understand your magic." I didn't respond, but she was right. Over the next few weeks, we rebuilt from scratch. I rewrote the AI protocols, simplified the decision layers, and gave the system something it was missing before. Empathy. Not literal emotion, obviously, but a feedback model that prioritized comfort and human presence over efficiency. It worked. When the prototype adjusted the lighting to mimic natural dawn based on our body temperature readings, Kara actually whispered, "Holy shit." We tested it again for the board. This time, it worked flawlessly. The building didn't just respond. It felt alive. Maybe Gregory was right about one thing. The real world is hard, but it's also where the dreamers belong. Perfect. Then part 3 will dive deeper, into the part where success starts to taste a little like danger, where vision meets ego, where the dream begins to cost something real. 6 months after that second demo, everything changed. Project Lumen wasn't just a concept anymore, it was real. A small housing unit stood at the edge of East Austin, shimmering like something half alive, a living prototype. People came to see it. Journalists, architecture students, even city officials who usually ignored experimental projects. The house adjusted its light as they walked through. The air softened when they spoke. You could feel it, that gentle hum of technology, behaving more like nature than a machine. It was working. And for the first time in years, so was I. Then came the call from Horizon Developments, a major construction firm based in San Francisco. They wanted to license Lumen's technology for a new eco-housing district. They were offering a 7-figure partnership, and full production rights. It was the kind of offer people dream about. But something in my stomach twisted when I read the contract. Buried in the fine print, all proprietary adaptive systems developed under the Lumen model shall become exclusive intellectual property of Horizon Developments. In other words, they wanted to own my dream. Kara thought I was crazy for hesitating. "Do you know what this means?" she said. "Funding, exposure, actual buildings. We could scale this globally. This is the chance to make it matter." "I know," I said quietly. "But not like this." She sighed, frustrated, maybe even disappointed. "Elena, this is bigger than you. Don't ruin it by being sentimental." That line stuck with me for days. Sentimental. Maybe I was. But I also remembered what it felt like to sit in that conference room at Hearthstone while someone told me my ideas were cute. I wasn't about to hand my life's work to another system that only saw numbers. So I said no. Politely, professionally, but firmly. And just like that, the emails stopped. Investors pulled back. Some clients who had shown interest suddenly reevaluated priorities. I could feel it, that quiet exile that happens when you stop playing by the rules. Even Kara started keeping her distance. She took on new projects, stopped coming to meetings, and eventually she stopped returning my calls. I didn't blame her. Atelier Novo was still a business, and I wasn't making it easy to be my partner. Then one morning I saw it, a press release from Horizon Developments, introducing the Nova Habitat, an adaptive micro-home using next-generation environmental intelligence. I clicked the photos. The structure looked identical to Lumen. The same modular walls, the same behavioral AI, even the same adaptive skylight design. Down to the algorithm, Kara and I wrote together. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I scrolled through the credits. Project lead, Kara Liu. The betrayal was so sharp it felt physical. I called her. No answer. I emailed. Nothing. 2 days later, I got a legal notice claiming that the Lumen design was jointly owned under our collaboration agreement, which meant she had the right to license it. It was technically true, but morally, it was theft. That week was a blur. I barely slept. I hired a small lawyer, a kind man who looked at the contract and sighed like he'd seen this story before. He said, "You could fight it, but they'll bury you in court. They have more money, more lawyers, and more patience." I just sat there, numb. It's strange how fast the world forgets who started the fire once it's burning bright. A month later, Horizon unveiled the first Nova Habitat complex. News outlets called it revolutionary. Kara was hailed as a pioneer of sustainable architecture. I watched from my apartment, a cup of cold coffee in hand, and thought, maybe Gregory was right all along. Maybe idealists just build things for other people to profit from. But somewhere in the middle of all that noise, a small message appeared in my inbox. No sender name, just a line of text. "They can steal your code, not your vision." Attached was a link, an anonymous donation of $25,000 sent through a digital arts foundation that funded independent inventors. I didn't know who sent it, but I knew what I was going to do. I reopened the Lumen files, the real version, the one I'd never shared, a model with open-source adaptability, designed to evolve beyond any single company's control. If they wanted to commercialize my dream, fine. I'd do the opposite. I'd make it free. Over the next 3 months, I uploaded everything. The designs, the AI scripts, the environmental data, all to a public repository under a Creative Commons license. I wrote one line in the project description: "Architecture belongs to everyone." Within weeks, students, engineers, and small architects around the world started building their own versions. They called them Lumen Pods. Some made shelters for refugees. Others built mobile classrooms or disaster relief homes. The movement spread faster than I ever could have planned. Lumen wasn't mine anymore. It was everyone's. And maybe that was the point all along. They never put my name on the headlines. That's fine. Lumen grew without me, across cities, deserts, and islands. Little homes breathing with light, learning from people, shaping comfort out of thin air. Sometimes, I pass one on my morning walk. I'll pause, watch the panels tilt toward the sun, and smile a little. Nobody knows I built the first one, but I do. And maybe that's enough. To know I made something that kept dreaming, even after I stopped needing credit. I think that's what creation really is. Not ownership, just legacy, quietly alive in the world.